It's time for Chapter 4 of Captain's Log, people. I am Michael Dismuke with Continuing Conversations, which is the podcast about Star Trek Adventures RPG, and now Captain's Log, which is a cool spin-off of the game. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures, the lead writer on Captain's Log, in addition to being a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures RPG. And of course, I'm here with the inestimable, I pronounced that totally horribly wrong, but that's okay. You know why? I'm not paid for this podcast. So deal with it, people. Jim Johnson.
Hey, everybody. Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and Captain's Log, published by Modiphius Entertainment. Lo these many years. Co-host on this here show with Michael. Lo these 80-odd episodes. Going strong here, heading on toward our 2-year anniversary, my friend. Amazing to imagine we've been doing this for that long, but we have a never-ending stream of products to talk about, and always find spin-off ways to riff and to do other things, and having super amounts of fun here. So this is all about Star Trek Adventures, and now, thanks for your reminder, it's not just Star Trek Adventures, it's also Captain's Log, because Captain's Log is a standalone product. It's not directly tied into the rest of the Star Trek Adventures line, although it's certainly compatible with everything that we've done up to this point. But it's its own thing. It's its own little beast off to the side there. Mm-hmm. Exciting to have our guest tonight, Aaron Pollyea. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, I'm Aaron Pollyea. I'm one of the freelance writers for Star Trek Adventures, and I guess Captain's Log. Mm-hmm. I've been around since the beginning, doing a lot of the Starship stuff. So you kind of see me here doing the Starship stuff.
Mm-hmm. This is especially fun for me because anybody who watches this podcast knows that Aaron is one of my highly engaged players on USS Pioneer, the hat he's wearing right now, which is our Star Trek Adventures game, which is now in its 5th season. But he's also the writer of writers when it comes to Star Trek Adventures on the ships and the technology, a lot of the science. Going back to the ships, he was a huge contributor on Utopia Planitia, which is one of the greatest books Star Trek Adventures came out with so far. Very well received, and I enjoyed watching him squirm when he was assigned to write the chapter on ships here, because it's truncated, and we're going to talk about that tonight, why that happens and how it fits into the Star Trek mechanism. But Aaron, do you want to let me enjoy seeing you writhe in some suffering about your experience having to edit yourself down to like these little blurbs about ships?
I can easily do 2,000 words, 3,000 words per ship easily. But trying to edit it down to like 100 words per ship, that's tough. It's tough. I could do it. You see, I hear that I kind of did it. I don't know if I actually got them that short. I'm pretty sure, Jim, you probably edited me down even further from what I had. But yeah, trying to fit everything that is important about a class into that short of an area.
I thought you were going to have an aneurysm. I felt so bad for you.
It's tough. But
it was like I knew right from the start it'd be a challenge for you, and that's partly why I did it, because I wanted you to have the opportunity to try something short, as opposed to more expansive that I know you love and that I really appreciate. I would love to do a new version of Utopia Planitia where you do have 3,000 to 5,000 words per ship and really expand on it. But we just don't have the budget to do a 600-page book, right? So we have to find that happy medium. But anyway, I think you did a great job with the Captain's Log.
We'll tell people if these ship entries are not big enough for you, you can always go to the Utopia Planitia and get the more extended version, because these ships are represented in more extensiveness in Utopia Planitia.
Right. Mm-hmm. So chapter 4, all about. For those of you who've been following along, chapter 3, of course, is all about creating your character. Very important. You go through the life path, you create a character. You're creating that character to start telling these amazing stories with. And we felt that it was really important to have another chapter all about creating a starship, because if you've seen the shows, the ship or the station is every bit as important as any of the characters that are on the show, like the Enterprise, the Voyager, Defiant, DS9, et cetera, et cetera. Those are living, breathing things that are as important to the series as anything else. And so it's not just enough to have your character. You need to know, what is your character's setting? Like where do they live? Where do they breathe? Where do they go on these amazing adventures? And so we created this chapter. We made sure to put this chapter in here, talking about designing your home, designing your vessel. We provide you a flow chart. Here's how to do it. Step A, B, C, D, E. It's a simplified version of what's in the full version of the game, obviously, because ships play a slightly different role in Captain's Log compared to Star Trek Adventures. And Michael, Aaron, let's talk a little about that a little bit. Like what is the role of a ship in this context, where if you look at the stat blocks for ships, there's almost not even a stat block, right? It's very, very simplified, or not simplified. I'm sorry, streamlined compared to what we have in Captain's Log. So comparing a ship, the ship's purpose in Star Trek Adventures versus the ship's purpose in Captain's Log. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, this is super important, actually. If there's one thing people remember after watching this podcast, it's this. This is a different game system. So when dealing with the starship in Captain's Log, you are not using it as an assist dice. So for those of you who've never played Star Trek Adventures, don't even worry that I said that, because you don't need to put useless information in your head. But in Star Trek Adventures, ships are oftentimes an additional dice to your roll. But in Captain's Log, you're always rolling 2 dice to determine whether you have success or failure, whether you generate from that roll momentum or threat. So when the ship needs to take an action, it acts like a character on its own. You still roll the 2 dice, or you roll the captain's attribute and the ship system to represent the ship and the crew helping out. But the point of the matter is, you roll 2 dice for the ship. And so the rules had to change accordingly to match that, because this is a narrative game. You're not doing damage per se. You are rolling the dice to determine whether this action was successful or whether it failed. And then you, as the writer, as your solo RPGist, are deciding the narrative, how it turns out. So that's a big difference. And there's a box on page 140 that goes into it. So for those of you who've played Star Trek Adventures, adjust your thinking about that. For those of you who are new to any kind of solo RPG, Captain's Log, and you've never played Star Trek Adventures, you're going to pick it up fine, because it's the first time you're coming across this rule. Right, Aaron?
Yeah, no.
I have to
that's fine.
He's still stunned.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then you'll see that there's a different use of the ship and how you use it with the Discovery era 32nd century. Big rule change,
because it's the only time in the entire book, out of all the rules, where you can roll 3 dice, because you're so advanced in the future in the 32nd century. So you look out for that rule for those 32nd century ships. Definitely there's an adaptation to compensate for all the amazing technology we saw in Discovery season 3 going forward.
Yeah, I wrote a bit about that in the Discovery crew pack, how the 32nd century ships are different, that they use this kind of computer technology that's called ImTech, that it actually uses technology that stems from the temporal Cold War to predict future computations. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. I can probably go into it for far too long, so I won't.
Fair enough. And for those of you who are going to be playing Captain's Log and not even going to be focusing on the 32nd century, then you don't have to even worry about that nuance, unless you want to. Like maybe you do decide to do like a temporal Cold War, and maybe you play a 32nd century ship that comes back in time to the 22nd century. You still got the technology, you're just in a completely different period of time. And what kind of shenanigans can you get up to at that point? Who knows? Have fun with it, see what happens. But yeah, so the chapter, we really kind of kick it off here, going into one of the first steps that you do for building out your ship is of course picking what era you're going to play in. Or if you don't want to decide that, you leave it up to chance. There's a probability matrix in here for picking the era, or you're rolling on the era that you want to play, whether it's the Enterprise era or 22nd century, 23rd, 24th, so on and so forth. So I have to admit, I really like this table, because like in general, when I come to a story or I come to a campaign, like I have a very good idea what era we're going to play in. But for Captain's Log, I've been thinking about Captain's Log. I'm like, maybe I'll just roll a random era and a random space frame and just see what happens, and then let the story dictate, or let the random choice of era and ship dictate what kind of stories I decide to tell, or with the tools. And there's a certain amount of excitement and freedom in that, where like I'm not coming into it the preconceived notion of, I'm going to be on a Galaxy class starship doing deep space exploration. Well, no, maybe not. Maybe I'm going to go tap into some of this huge wealth of knowledge and information that we provide in here, and all the 50 or 60 space frames that we provide in here, and say, you know what, I'm just going to just let it happen and just see what, maybe I'll end up on a California class or a Cardenas class or like Malachowski, like whatever. I just want to go tell a cool, fun Star Trek story. So any thoughts, you two, on just like letting the matrices just kind of like dictate what ship and era you're going to play in?
Yeah, I mean, playing from experience, the first, when we were playtesting this, my friend, he rolled a Malachowski class, and I had never even heard of this class of ship. But boy, when you read the description on it, because of course, it's not just to look at this book and read the short entry. We have Google. Go Google the class, find out a little bit more about it. It changed the whole tone of the game. It's like, oh, wow, this is a rough and tumble, rugged patrol vessel. It's running into Klingons. Like, this is we're post movie era. This is dark. And it changed his character. He became like cowboy diplomacy. And then I play myself. I rolled a Sydney class vessel, which is a colony ship. And I always thought, well, that's kind of boring, just going to colonies. But then getting into the game, it was fun. And learning more about these ships has excited me, as opposed to picking an Intrepid class or a Galaxy class or a Defiant class. We've already seen those on the shows. Make your own stories.
Yeah, the point of the different ship classes is that they all should have a different feel, a different role, a different idea behind them that makes them unique, that makes them a class. So yeah, having these kind of random tables helps you go outside of your comfort zone, so to speak. Like, hey, I know a Galaxy, sure. That's where I want to be because I want to be in my hotel in space. But, having that random choice of finally going, oh, here's a freedom class. Well, what does that mean? It kind of looks like a Galaxy in a weird way, but it's clearly a different ship. Okay, well, that can adjust my story and send me down a path I never really expected.
Wonderful stuff. You're on mute, Jim, just so you know.
Sorry about that. My apologies. So we offer several different eras that you can play in, and there's random tables for each of those eras. So if you don't want to pick a space frame, go ahead and just roll the dice, let chance give you your command, or the ship that you serve on. Like, I don't know that we've necessarily mentioned this on some of our other previous episodes, but you don't have to play a captain if you don't want to. Like, you don't have to be the captain of the ship. You could be a department head or a lower decker or an enlisted officer. Like, you could do literally anything you want in this book. Like, don't let Captain's Log, the title of the game, dissuade you from playing whatever character you want. In fact, the more I get into this, and the more I play test it, and the more I play with it, and the more I think about it, it's like, you know what? I really want to play a junior officer and like start them at like literally lower decks, ground zero, fresh ensign on a new ship. I'm not picking my command, or I'm not picking what ship I serve on. I'm being assigned to a ship. What ship am I being assigned to? And I'm going to roll on this random table, and I'm really going to embrace those random tables and just let the game and the story dictate where my story goes, and I'll just see what happens. I'm really excited about that idea, and I may just dust off one of the junior officers that I wanted to play in an RPG like 15 years ago and never got a chance to. I did some world building for this character, and I just never got a chance to play him. And now this is an opportunity for me to get into the weeds here. So
it's really realistic. I mean, captains and crew don't get to pick their ship. They're assigned generally, unless you are like the best captain in the planet where you get to pick your own ship. But when you're assigned, how do you deal with that? There's a conflict. When I rolled the Malachowski class and the Sydney class in those games, there was a conflict right with just that. It's like, well, how the heck did I end up on this ship? And that is part of the story. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're needed there. It's Starfleet's a service. You don't get to pick and choose your command. But sure. And I think that one way that it would be an interesting tie-in between Captain's Log and regular Star Trek adventures is this might be a really good way of building up a good backstory with your character in Star Trek Adventures. Like I'm gonna run them starting off as a brand new ensign, and I'm gonna have these like really quick adventures that I can do, and I generate all these ships that they've served on, their duties, et cetera, and then I go into the game with all the other players instead of just running this solo campaign on my own.
Yeah. Thank you. I love hearing that. We've talked about that. And yes, reiterate that this is the best not the best. This is a great option for career event building.
Mm-hmm. And that, like, once you build some of those career events in your character with Captain's Log, when you come to the game table with your other players and you're playing through your game, this creates instant grist for a scene with your players. Like if you're in 10 forward just chilling, hey, what was your experience during the war? Harken back to your first ship you served on. Like, what was that all about? And you've got this wealth of material that you've already gone through, and you're like, well, let me tell you about this adventure, or let me tell you about the story that we had going on Capricorn 7, and here all the shenanigans we got into, so on and so forth. So it gives you that much more backstory and grist for your character that you can then share with your other players. And you can just get even deeper into the weeds on your characters and your development stuff. So
I know a lot of our characters. Well, most people when they're game mastering this game, I'd risk to say they're coming in as captains, commanders, lieutenants, but it makes sense that for new groups getting together, that in building your backstory, you want to declare what ships you served on before. So you can go to the random table for your era. And say, okay, I'm a commander. I probably served on 3 ships. Roll them randomly, and then find out what class of ship you were on, and create your story from that. Even if it's just that basic use of the random table, that's super fun. Because again, when I'm rolling on these tables, I'm having these sparks of imagination and being like, "Whoa, how'd that work? Why'd that happen?" And it's surprising myself while I'm playing the game.
Mm-hmm. So we offer about, I haven't counted them recently. I think we had about 65 to 70 space frames in here, including a handful that did not appear in Utopia Planitia, partly because Utopia Planetia's scope was up to the 25th century, like just the start of the 25th century that you see in Picard. Some of the Star Trek Online ships were in there, but we did not get into the 32nd century. We just haven't seen the end of Discovery yet, so we're not sure what quite is happening there. So we held back the 32nd century out of Utopia Planitia intentionally. However, Captain's Log, slightly different beast, very standalone product. We thought there is a possibility that there are players who would probably want to play in the 32nd century, even though we don't have a huge amount of material on it yet, because Discovery Season 5 hasn't come out yet, and we've also learned that Discovery Season 5 will be the last season for Discovery. Although I personally remain hopeful that the Starfleet Academy series that's being in development, I'm hoping that will be set in the 32nd century as well, so that we can continue to discover like just what is going on in that time frame and what kind of cool things and what kind of cool stories can happen. So we do offer 5 32nd century ships in this book that I hope people decide to check out, or maybe the random tables will make you go that route. And then you can tell some new amazing stories there.
And we got to say the names of the classes, Jim. You got to talk about those 5 classes.
So if you are a gamer who is familiar with Utopia Planitia, the ships in here will be familiar to you. If you are new to Star Trek, or you're new to Captain's Log, or you're new to whatever, don't even worry about Utopia Planitia. Every key ship that you've seen in Star Trek, or maybe you've heard about, are in here, except with the notable exception, of course, with the Protostar, right? Because we don't have the license to Prodigy, so we could not include Prodigy in here. And then, of course, the Enterprise, we don't have the license to Strange New Worlds either, but the Enterprise is still the Enterprise, right? So, the Constitution class is the Constitution class, knock on wood. So that's in the book, certainly, the Constitution class. It's the original series picture version, as opposed to the slicker looking, Strange New Worlds version, but, it's still the Connie. You can use your imagination to make it look like whatever you wanted to, whether it's the original series, animated series, the refit from the movies, like whatever.
the cage version.
Yeah, exactly. They're all a little different. But yeah, so the 32nd century, we can talk about the rules nuance there, Michael, if you want. But the 5 classes that we included, which these class names I'm not sure they're canon yet. I don't think they've been announced them on screen, but we got the
not on screen. Yeah.
We've got the Angelou class, the Eisenberg class, the Friendship class, Janeway, and Kirk. So these, and there's pictures for each of them in the book as well. And so if you've watched season 3 and season 4 of Discovery, you'll be familiar with these ships because they've been on screen. Even though the names themselves, I don't think they've canonized the names yet, but that's informally, beta canonish at the moment. That's where we are. But did you guys want to mention that little rules nuance for the 32nd century ships?
Yeah, sure. So again, as I said, generally for Captain's Log, 99.9% of the time, you're rolling 2 dice to determine whether you're succeeding or failing. This is a small but impactful adaptation that only applies to ships in the 32nd century, where when a starship with this technology, this is the interstitial multi-vector transcomputronics technology.
IMTech.
IMTech, yeah, for short. So when a starship with this technology rolls any task, the ship is allowed to roll 3 dice rather than the usual 2, and they get to pick the best rolls to determine if they have success or not. So a twist on that rule, but well reflecting that futuristic technology that we see in Discovery.
Yeah, and it's more than just the 32nd century. It specifically begins in the 28th century when the temporal Cold War really starts building up, and we see a lot of the stuff with the future Federation from Star Trek Voyager.
Mm-hmm. Makes total sense. Yep, very good.
So I've got a little bit of a challenging question here for the two of you. So the overall conceit of Captain's Log, of course, is that you are playing a Starfleet character on a Starfleet vessel or a Starfleet station, and going off and doing the traditional Star Trek stories that we've seen on the shows, that you're Starfleet doing things. That being said, like the character generation chapter, you could play literally anything. It doesn't. You can play Starfleet, non-Starfleet, Klingons, Romulans, Ferengi, Cardassians, a species of your own creation, whatever. There's really no limitation to what you can play, and because we only had so much page count and so much space, we did not have room to include non-Starfleet ships in this book, right? So we weren't able to include Klingons, we weren't able to include Romulans, et cetera, et cetera. There are currently no plans to expand on this book with any type of supplements, because it's really meant to be a standalone product. Sales go bonkers, maybe we'll revisit that, right? We'll always listen to the almighty dollar, right? Ultimately, sad to say, capitalist society, we're here to make money at the end of the day, but we don't really like to talk about that because we're here about the creative stuff. But with that being said, what are your ideas? Like if there's a group out there, because I know there's going to be groups out there, or there's going to be players out there who are going to want to do a Klingon experience, or going to want to do a Romulan experience, et cetera, how could they maybe take, given that we've streamlined how ships even operate in this game, to the extent that the stat blocks are, really pretty, I don't want to say simplified, streamlined, where all we're really doing is presenting the systems and the departments and the numbers. What kind of advice would you give to a player coming to Captain's Log who wants to play a non-Starfleet game? How could they take this chapter and create a Romulan warbird, or a D7, or a Ferengi marauder, or whatever? What are your thoughts around that?
I would just have them look at a ship that is comparable to that ship. So like if you're talking about a D7 or a Katinga, the Starfleet vessel that is close to it would be the Constitution class. And so you'd look at the Constitution class systems and departments and then go, well, the Katinga probably has better weapon systems, but maybe not as good sensors and computers. So maybe I'll just move a point or two around. And then for the departments, well, you know what, maybe it's not as sciencey, but it's probably more security oriented because it's, a Katinga or a D7. So I'll move a point from science over into security. There you go. That easy.
Yep. And if all else fails, hit Aaron up on social media and ask him.
Yeah, and I probably have an opinion. Yeah.
He bleeds it out of his face. It'll just come out.
I'll just go, these are the stats.
Or Michael, maybe you could lean on Aaron or one of your other regular contributors to continuing conversations, or to continuing mission, and just do a quick and dirty article about, hey, I want to play Captain's Log and I really like it, but I don't want to be Starfleet. I want to be something else. And maybe offer, a couple hundred words of advice on, exactly what Aaron just said. Like, find a comparable scale, find a comparable era, and then play with the numbers, because ultimately the numbers, especially in Captain's Log, like if you're tweaking the numbers, it's not going to break the game. You just have different capabilities. Like your comm system may be a little bit more powerful than what you expect, but so what? Have fun and play with it. So
yeah, I have a feeling actually with Captain's Log more so than even Star Trek Adventures. I think Captain's Log is probably going to have the fastest, quickly generated stuff like that, including people offering new random tables. I really do. So I think the room for growth here and creativity is going to be really, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So great. So we talk about, you're picking your era, you pick your ship, your space frame, your ship basically. You have some advice in here about creating the ship's backstory. And, even though this is only one page full of great advice, I was thinking about this, partly, Aaron, because what you were saying about using Captain's Log to create your character's backstory and then go into a game with it. Just reading this one page, like you could easily use Captain's Log to develop your ship's backstory too, right? Where like you're focusing on your character, but there's no reason the main character of your Captain's Log saga couldn't be the ship. Like maybe you make a ship, and you're like, okay, I'm going to tell the whole story about the USS Excelsior. That's my ship. And then you start it off, okay, I'm going to roll up Captain Styles as my character, and I'm going to run some sessions I'm going to run some Captain's Log stories with Styles, with all the shenanigans that happen with him, and then he retires or gets promoted. A new captain comes in, and maybe you play a junior officer on the Excelsior that's newly transferred there. But the Excelsior itself, you're building a story about that ship, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can kind of carry that on, and then maybe at that point you decide to quote unquote graduate to the to Star Trek Adventures from Captain's Log, and you bring in some players and you say, okay, we're going to play on the Excelsior. Here's this amazing backstory that the Excelsior has that I developed through Captain's Log. Now we're going to tell some new stories with it. We got a nice refit. We've enhanced the engines. We're adding the talents from Star Trek Adventures. We've got this ship, but it's got because like some of the ships on Star Trek certainly have a long history, right? I mean, the Enterprise being the obvious example. But I
mean, I love your premise because just Discovery alone, how many captains did it have so far?
Right,
5.
Right.
It's at 5, right? I think I'm counting right. 5 captains: Lorca, Saru, Burnham, Giorgio, Pike. Oh, and Tilly. 6.
And Tilly, briefly, yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that's almost hilarious. If we had if you had a Captain's Log based off the ship and like why it goes through so many captains. I can see it almost being Lower Deck style. It's
before Strange New Worlds was an actual show, we always knew that Enterprise had 2 captains before Kirk and had already been around for over 20 years by the time the original series happened. We have Robert April, and then we had Christopher Pike. Mm-hmm. Why not fill out those stories that lead up to Kirk taking command? And this is all before Strange New Worlds, but that's an example. We already knew that there were these stories that obviously had to have happened.
Right. Love it. It.
Yeah. So anyway, so work on your character, work on your ship's backstory. And if you want to make the ship the main character of your Captain's Log, do it, man, or lady, or person, or non-gendered, whatever. I mean, by all means, have fun with it. Do something different and creative. So from there, then we get into a discussion about unique traits for your vessel. And traits, of course, are things that are unique about that ship. Usually, it's polity, whether it's Federation or Klingon or Romulan or whatever. But there are other interesting traits that you can assign to a ship as well. And why don't you just provide some examples about interesting traits that you can give to a ship that just add interesting nuance to it?
Boy, there's tons. It's every kind of a trait is like a description of the ship, and you could have so many different descriptions of a ship. I mean, we have a few that are listed here, like Frankenstein fleet, that it stemmed from that one time period that right after the Wolf 359, where Starfleet was just taking bits and pieces from a whole bunch of different older ships, putting them together and then forcing them into service really quick. We have Renowned down there. That means it's made a name for herself out there through multiple missions. This idea that it's been Borg enhanced. with some strange technology. Like, it doesn't have to be Borg, but it could be like, hey, we had a whole bunch of Klingon exchange crew coming over, and now there's like Klingon systems on board as well, because that's what they know how to build and maintain. Warship and flagship, those are a little more very specific to only a very few ships. Like in Starfleet, I don't think there would be very many ships that would have warship as a trait, though it would happen. But you could have like old or long serving. You could have trustworthy, like that it has that kind of idea of wherever this ship goes, you can trust that the people on board will they're trustworthy. Or maybe like Nightingale. I think I might have mentioned that at one point as a possible trait for like a hospital ship, that having this ship appear in orbit is a sign of hope. Nightingale,
How does that translate into the game is traits can work an advantage. So if you have, for instance, we were talking about prototype or flagship in the game, if the USS Enterprise shows up and has that trait flagship, if it's narratively makes sense, you roll on the advantage table right away. And it shows what that at the same time, flagship, when you accidentally, your warp drive conks out and you drift into Klingon space, could be also a negative. So you may have to roll on the threat table at that time. So it works into narration. Those traits work into narration as compunction to roll an advantage or a complication in that sense.
Yeah.
Just an interesting description, and then see how it affects a situation for that advantage or disadvantage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we provide examples in the book of some sample traits. And those of you who are already familiar with Star Trek Adventures, maybe you've read Utopia Planitia, or maybe you just read the core book. I think another place to find some traits would be to look at the mission profiles that you can use in Star Trek Adventures for your ship. That it's an overlay that adds some capabilities to your ship and helps focus the vessel onto like, what are the missions it's most likely to be performing? Is it a Pathfinder? Is it deep space reconnaissance? Is it a multi-purpose vessel? Is it a recovery and rescue type of vessel? And all those, just the titles of those mission profiles that are in the core book and Utopia Planitia, you could easily turn those into traits. That could that's just like, this is what the ship does. This is what its mission is. And you can swap those traits out, episode to episode or session to session, like however you want to do it. And then another thing I was thinking is, and this just ties into what you were saying, Aaron, it's probably not going to be anything new, but like if you're the reputation idea, if you're familiar with the reputation rules for Star Trek Adventures, that impacts your character, whether they're well known or reviled, or they're the bane of the empire or something. Like you could easily assign those traits as well, to where if maybe your vessel got some sort of infamy or notoriety during one of the wars, and so like that has a trait, and that trait could impact the relationship that you have meeting certain alien species, because if they know the reputation of the ship, that might influence how they decide to react to you. And then you tie in the probability tables and the probability matrices to like, okay, maybe you're going into a situation and it's like, highly probable that something will happen. However, you've got this trait on the ship that, they hate this ship for whatever it's done. Maybe you're a new captain on it, but they hate the ship. And that'll influence the probability matrix a little bit, and maybe turn it down a notch or turn it up a notch or something. So have fun playing with that. Get really creative with these traits, and help make that ship a really vital thing, just as strong as your character. Right, your character will have traits. Your ship can have traits too. So just have fun with that.
I just thought of another idea for a trait. In Star Trek before, Starfleet had an integrated service. So in like TOS, where it was basically all just humans on a ship or all Vulcans on a ship, you could actually have like Vulcan crew or Tellarite crew, and it would help distinguish that ship from the other ships of its class.
Mm-hmm.
that obviously goes away when you get into the movie era and TNG era, where there is an integrated crew between all the different species. But during TOS and before, it was generally that different species served on different ships for various reasons.
Right. You know what that means, Michael? That means I'm going to take Captain's Log, and I'm going to combine it with the Lower Decks campaign guide, and I'm going to make myself a clump ship.
Exactly.
I'm going to have a trait, pack-led crew.
Strong.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then the chapter continues on. We get into one of the other key nuance differences between Captain's Log and Star Trek Adventures, and that's how ship talents are handled in the game. So we offer a wealth of talents here. Again, we were pulling from Utopia because Utopia Planitia was a pretty comprehensive list of ship talents, and we even added a bunch of new ones. We were able to take the vast majority of those talents and drop them right into Captain's Log. There were a few we omitted because mechanically they didn't make sense. But the titles could easily become traits or just nuances to the ship. So let's talk a little bit about how talents work in Captain's Log compared to Star Trek Adventures, and what can a player expect to do with these talents.
Sure. So the skinny on it, again, if they want to roll their random talents on page 174, there's a table that has 60 talents listed, or it's a 3D20 table, so you can roll for your talents. Now, why is that important? The difference is with Captain's Log, ship talents can operate like focuses. Okay, because we don't have talents like in Star Trek Adventures in this game, where it's more expansive. What happens is if your ship has a certain talent, like say, for instance, a blade of armor, then when you're going into a scene and maybe you've decided that, you're going through a minefield. Well, okay, it makes sense that your blade of armor can take some hits. And so what you would do is roll on your ship, your ship's attributes, its systems, and its department. And if you roll and treat it like a focus, how we do it with the focuses, if you roll under that department number, then it automatically produces an advantage, and then you roll on the advantage table. So that's a big difference from Star Trek Adventures. Again, if you've never read Star Trek Adventures, good. You don't have anything muddling up your mind. This is a very simplified system so that you're treating your ship like you treat the captain's roles. Talents are equal to focuses. And again, we explain how that works in gameplay. Really simplified. I stunned everyone with that amazing summary. I love that.
I don't know if I have anything to really add.
For those of you who are watching the podcast, Aaron has his tongue hanging out of his mouth. He fell off the chair, and Jim is weeping because he's so glad of the simplicity. He's wiping tears from his eyes.
I'm really I'm lost in the idea of playing a clump ship in a pack like that. I'm going all about the pack lists right now. But what I do want to add about this list of talents, and which are effectively, like Michael said, focuses in this game. We do offer some non-Federation talents in here. So even though we didn't have the ability to add non-Starfleet space frames in here for you to pick and choose from, we do include them in the list of talents. So it should be a fairly easy effort to assign talents to your Romulan vessel or your Cardassian vessel or whatever, just by picking through these talents if you want to. I mean, heck, you can even do the USS Pegasus, right, that had the secret cloaking device if you want to, or the Defiant, et cetera, et cetera. We just provide a wealth of options here for you to build just really cool ships if you want to. And if you want it to be completely random and see, like, maybe you're building a technical test bed that has your engineers of your particular species just decide to just throw random stuff onto this ship just to see what happens. I haven't tried it yet, Aaron, but I'm almost wondering, like, wouldn't it be fun to roll a random space frame and then pull up the Starship talent matrix and then just like roll however many talents are appropriate for the scale just to see what you get, see what weird combinations you get, and then figure out, okay, what the heck am I going to do with this ship? What kind of stories can I tell with it?
Hey, spoiler alert, Strange New Worlds, season 2, episode 1, that was totally a Frankenstein ship. Whatever they built, it wasn't our normal, not Constellation class. Someone help me.
Crossfield.
It was not our normal Crossfield class. So they obviously took a random table, scrounged what they could from the leftovers of the war and called it what they wanted. Yeah.
Great Frankenstein fleet. Yeah.
Frankenstein.
Absolutely. But again, I haven't, and I won't spend time now doing it, but just looking at the list of 60 talents that Starship talents we provide here, what player, maybe this is a challenge for players now that you've got the book, or hopefully you've pre-ordered it, or you've got the print copy by this point. What player out there can create a starship with the most random combination of four or five talents or whatever? Like what are the wacky combinations that we can make out of this? I don't even know here.
A dual environment with multi-vector assault mode, and when you separate it, you separate the environments.
Yeah. So you have your cetacean crude part of the Prometheus. You have your human one, and then you have let's say your Horta.
Yeah, awesome
part. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or you've got the deluxe galley with the independent phaser supply. Like what? Weird, interesting combination. So anyway, have fun with that. Again, I think that's one of the powers of Captain's Log that we haven't entirely embraced with Star Trek Adventures. I think, and we've been doing it more in more recent books with the random tables. But I think Captain's Log we really dug into the random tables, and I think you can have a lot of fun just generating random cool stuff. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's one of the utilities of the book too. Is like if you are playing Star Trek Adventures, you could use this book to create use these random tables as tools to help you with your storytelling and your development in Star Trek Adventures. You can port back and forth pretty easily.
I mean, we're boldly going where no solo RPG has gone before. And in 56 years, I want to look back and be equally proud.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So then we talk, we're getting close to the end of the chapter here. We talk a little bit about improving your starship, right? So certainly you can improve your character or, make incremental changes to it as they grow through the stories. They're going to grow and change. Change is a constant. Nobody stays static, even if you want to. You're still going to change day by day. Things will happen and you have to react to them, and that changes you. Starships change and react too. So again, Captain's Log is a streamlined version of STA. So milestones work a little bit differently, and it's really up to the player. Like if you want to give yourself a milestone, give yourself a milestone. You want to give the ship a milestone, do it. There's no XP to gain. There's no particular threshold you have to reach. It's just whatever serves the story that you're trying to tell. And just want to say, Michael, Aaron, any thoughts on like what to do with milestones specifically for a ship? Any big ideas or advice?
I would always go with the whole increasing a department more than anything, just because it represents the crew becoming better on board the ship or more skilled at their jobs rather than the ship's systems. The ship systems to me is a little more towards like refitting and going back to space dock and putting in new systems. Whereas like the crew's skill seems to be more directed towards those departments. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm inclined based off, I have to go back to Star Trek Adventures and watching what my crew has done over the last 5 seasons is to go with talents. Our ship has literally evolved twice and it's had different components, even a borrowed cloaking device. It's earned quantum slipstream drive. So I'd really over time be really looking at those talents to express technological advancement in a ship and then blow it up and start fresh. I'm not saying I'm doing that, by the way, Aaron, before you get, they're kind of attached to our ship. Yeah, I'm not blowing anything up.
You can kind of tell I'm attached, right?
I know.
And then, no chapter about creating your home in the stars would be complete if we didn't talk about, building a space station or an outpost, because, certainly Star Trek has evolved over the decades, and it's not just about ships anymore. You can certainly build out a Deep Space Nine or a star base or an outpost like a communication station or something. Or, even if you want to do like a duck blind or something and have an adventure in that duck blind. We wanted to make sure that we gave people an opportunity, if you want to do like the DS9 experience, instead of building out a ship, build a station. It's not really all that different. You pick a scale, you pick your talents, you're off and running. Everything else is narrative and flavor text for the most part. You can have traits for a station too. So just maybe some thoughts on preparing a station instead of a ship for the purposes of Captain's Log.
Well, for this, we declined to use systems and departments for a space station, just because we felt that at least in Captain's Log, that a space station should be generally more abstract. It's not generally going to be there to roll dice for you, because a space station campaign, even solo, is more going to be focused on the characters. The station's stationary. This is about the characters moving around inside the station or dealing with those people that come to the station.
Yeah, I think again, to this point, it's like you wouldn't really create stats for a planet. And these scales of these stations and their capabilities are mind-blowing. One photon torpedo will rarely, if ever, take them out. So this is the narration which really captures me. If anybody wants a guide on how to think about space stations besides Deep Space Nine, I encourage people to always read the Vanguard novel, because the way they treat that space station is great. It really creates it as an entirely another environment. So when playing solo RPG, you're more likely to maybe all of a sudden bring in a ship. If you're at a station playing a station game, you may get a random ship showing up to take you on a mission, and then you could bring in some stats. But generally than that, back to what Aaron said, didn't feel it was necessary to assign systems or department. You would be more likely rolling on a probability matrix, asking like, does this station have holodecks? Highly probable, yes.
Yeah.
And then you just have to roll 1 through 18 and it's a yes. If you roll 19 and 20, it says a no. Well, why not? Is it because they're malfunctioning? Roll on the probability table again. And maybe that becomes an adventure,
Yeah, good stuff. All right. So Michael, Aaron, any last thoughts on building out a ship or a station for your Captain's Log game? Any closing words here that you want to impart upon the audience?
Be creative. Think outside the box for stations. Stations are structures. So what's the architecture like? What is it? Does it have arches on the outside like Deep Space Nine did, so to speak? The long pylons. Does it have like an Art Deco styling? Because when you're building these giant structures, they are going to look unique and different.
Yep. Mine for this chapter is quite interesting, again, based off real play experience with my niece. Is we played the first 2 acts of her adventure and we never rolled up the ship. We know she beamed down in the adventure, but we never declared what ship it is. So we're still waiting at some point in the story where the ship comes into play. I'm going to be like, hey, you know what? We're playing TNG era. It's time to find out what kind of ship you have. And I just can't wait to see her face where she's like, oh man, that's right. What's our ship about? So we've decided to do creation and play with her. So just understand Captain's Log is you don't have to start rolling it up at first. You could do creation and play. It's your clay to mold. Have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, great conversation. Thank you so much for that. Aaron, as always, appreciate you being here. As always, with continuing conversations, we want to close the evening with gratitude. So Michael, why don't you kick us off? What gratitude do you have for us this evening?
Sure. Still going on the social media route. A whole bunch of people were giving love as to why they like Star Trek Adventures RPG. And I'm going to take it to someone who's been on our show before, Lewanika Miller. And I love what he said. He said the best thing he likes is the excitement in the eyes of a new player when they first realize the power of an immediate momentum spend. It's amazing. So there's momentum also in Captain's Log. So people prepare to be amazed.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And Aaron, what's your gratitude for this evening?
I am filled with gratitude for the special effects team today from the last Strange New Worlds episode. And it's from one shot. And I sat there frame by frame going through it and going, okay, it was when they went to warp from Starbase 1 away from Jupiter, and you could see the warp field forming. and watched the distortion of Jupiter as light started to bend.
Oh, wow.
Good job.
Oh, I got to go back and watch it tonight. Thanks a lot.
It's very brief. You have to go through it frame by frame, but you can actually see Jupiter starting to distort from their viewpoint. And I'm like, yes, that is correct. I love the detail. Thank you very much. I am filled with gratitude that like my little geeky heart went, a warp field.
As one of my friends who is now into Star Trek because he started playing the game, when he came over last Thursday for a watch party and he went, they spent money on this. So that's what it is.
Yeah, go back and look and you can watch Jupiter like start to distort. And it looks really good. It looks really good.
Literally, as soon as we're done, I'm going to go watch it. Yeah. In fact, now that you've mentioned it, I'm going to have to bug Dr. Aaron and find out if she had any input into that. Like, was she responsible for talking about the fact, oh, hey, by the way, when the ship goes to warp and you see Jupiter in the background, there should be some distortion on the warp field there. Or I'm willing to bet that the special effects people probably had a sense of that. But I wonder if Dr. Aaron had a hand in out the bugger about that. But no, Aaron, great attention to detail. I did not even catch that. I was just appreciating the visuals in general because Strange New Worlds visual team is just amazing. And I love the fact, and this is a digression and I apologize. The fact that I think Strange New Worlds is one of the series that really kind of breaks the plane of ships, right? Getting away from the horizontal or kind of tradition of ships. Like they really get into the angles and playing with the fact that space is 3-dimensional and
gorgeous.
There's no up or down.
Oh, when it unclamped and just took off in that direction, I was like, yes, thank you. Oh, that was so good.
Where are you going? I got vertigo, but I love it. Anyway, so thank you, Aaron, for that gratitude. Really appreciate it. I have 2 gratitudes for tonight. Number 1 is gratitude for both of you and all the writers on Captain's Log for pulling this together, making it happen. I was initially a little uncertain about what this product was going to be and look like. Like I thought it was going to go well, but I just didn't know. I was like, what is this going to be? And it was so much work. I know we put so much work into it. And Michael, you shepherded the forces and really helped me when I needed help because I was working on 4 other books at the same time. And I needed some lead writers to help me out. And boy, I tell you, the more I talk about this book with people and the more I play it on my own, it's like, oh, it's really grown on me. And it's to the point now where I really want to dig into it to the point that I'm using it as a game mastering tool so that I can play collaboratively with friends, not just by myself, but with friends. Because I think I love the streamlined nature of it. I love the super, super hyper focus on the narrative because that's really what I'm all about these days as a gamer. I like mechanics fine for some games, but most of the time I don't care. Like I just want to get into the narrative and the story and the drama and the cool stuff that's happening. So this game is starting to grow on me in ways that I did not expect. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you to all the other writers for being involved in it. Super excited. And then finally, thank you to all the fans, all the Star Trek fans, past, present, and future. You've inspired me day in and day out with your creativity online that you share with us. And then I see it on the YouTubes and the Twitches and the blogs and just all that stuff. I'm just like, as hard as we work on these books for you, I'm inspired by what you're doing with them and what you're talking about. And you're telling your friends and you're telling other people and you're supporting each other. Just the fans. I just love the Star Trek Adventures fan base that we have. It's so self-sustaining at this point that it's just a joy to see it. Like, I mean, on some of the groups we see, they post the new members coming in every week. And it's usually like a list of 25, 30 names or something. And I'm like, wow, these people are just getting into it. It's just exciting. So I'm just thank you for all the fans. I hope you're enjoying the stuff that we're bringing out. And I hope you're enjoying Captain's Log or that you will be curious enough about it to go check it out. So yeah, thanks again, everybody. So with that being said, thanks again for another great episode. Thanks for being with us. Look forward to talking more about Captain's Log next time. And until then, be safe, be well, live long and prosper.
IDIC. Love you all.
Take care. I'm going to go watch Strange Worlds now.
Me too.
I need to go find that warp field.
Indeed.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Michael.
See you. Thanks.
Take care, guys.
Bye.